Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is April 4th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope everyone is doing well today. A few stories I'd like to discuss today has to do with a brief update with Brexit and a couple of things dealing with President Trump, one with his recent rants about Mexico, and also an update with the U.S.-China trade talks. So first, across the pond, well, what's going on? Well, we have the European Council President Donald Tusk is now proposing to offer the United Kingdom a 12-month flexible extension to its Brexit date. His plan would allow the UK to leave sooner if Parliament ratifies a deal, but it would need to be agreed by EU leaders at a summit next week. And again, I do believe that all members of the EU would have to sign off on this. Now, I would have to imagine if Donald Tusk put this to the floor, he probably knows that it would get approval. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen, a potential 12-month, quote-unquote, flexible extension to Brexit. Remember, we were supposed to leave back in March 29th, a week ago. But the British people are still there in the EU because politicians can't get their act together to fulfill the wishes and the vote of the people from a referendum taking place back in 2016. What does this mean? It means, well, I don't know what it means. This is hysterical. Just leave. Just leave. So you have a couple things going on here. You have, according to the Attorney General, Geoffrey Cox, he has told the BBC that if they fail, meaning the government fails, the delay is likely to be a long one. So it's likely, if they fail, that it will be a long delay. It shouldn't be. What a disgrace this is to the institution of democracy, to a people's vote, to the referendum. But this is the cynicism I have been warning you guys about that might uproot itself and start to be in our faces. Well, here it is. Here it is. This is the dirty cat and mouse game, the dirty parlor tricks that politicians play, that the EU bureaucrats want to play. Because I told you it was one of two things. It was either a hard Brexit, where presumably it would be all chaos, to send a message to the other members of the EU, don't do it, look what happens. The UK, a huge country, a huge economy, they stumbled. They're failing. You don't want to leave now, do you? Or, through these types of political shenanigans, can say, nope, look, we're just going to drag out this process as long as possible until the people give up, they say enough is enough, and we just call the whole thing off. Well, that's where we are. It's one of those two choices. Because we still have the House of Lords that are going to debate the most recent vote in Parliament, which was to go for an extension, to continue this, that it will be a no-deal Brexit. But we don't know if that's going to happen or not. Because in order for that to become a law, the House of Lords has to agree to it. So they were debating that today. I believe they will finish debating that on Monday. And then they will put it to a vote, and I'm sure there could be amendments. So then that would have to go back and forth to be approved. So this is far from over, but remember, we have until April 12th. That's the next deadline. And something has to be approved and voted on before that. So I can't make this stuff up anymore. You still have the potential May 22nd deadline if a deal can be approved. Again, remember, May 22nd is because on May 23rd, that's the beginning of the EU parliamentary elections. So then that's another serious question. Will the UK put forth members to be voted for the EU Parliament? And who are those people most likely to be? They're most likely to be Eurosceptics, people who want to leave. Does the EU really want that type of noise and additional drama? Because you're going to get people in there like Nigel Farage, who's already in there, but he was a big proponent of leaving. So does the EU want to pin themselves against more Eurosceptics, more people like Nigel Farage? And I will not be surprised, given the recent, let's just say, failures of the EU on so many different fronts, and with the rise of populism all over the world, specifically Europe, the United States, but here specifically within the EU, you're probably going to get a lot more Eurosceptics elected to the EU Parliament this year. So do the bureaucrats really want this? I don't think they would. But they're weighing the cons, the pros and cons of whether or not Do we tolerate a little bit more populism, which is, I mean, there's nothing they can do about that now, but at least we might still have the UK here. So that's what they're juggling. So those are the two options. They either want it to be a hard Brexit and they want it to be very rough, a very bumpy road, or they want to try to extend this thing as long as possible and say, all right, and just hope that the British people give up and say, all right, hell with this, we're just going to stay in here. It's one of those two. We'll see what happens. Now, President Trump has recently been saying that he's not too happy with what's going on down there in Mexico. Obviously, we know this. But then there have been some recent threats pretty much saying, look, if some of this stuff doesn't get cleared up, we're going to levy tariffs on some goods, some products, and, I'm just going to shut down the border. I'm just going to shut it down. No trade, nothing. Boom, that's it. Well, I guess somebody talked some sense into him or had some people with some business savvy or whatever who obviously trade back and forth said, look, Mr. President, you can't do that. Be devastating to the economy. And, of course, the president wants to own the economy and the stock market. So now, again, he's boxing himself in. So now he had a backstep and say, oh, no, I didn't mean that. But look, seriously, Mexico has to get a little tougher on all these drugs that are coming into this country. And what kind of deadline did he give them? Tomorrow, next week, next month, 6 months? No, he gave them 1 year. He said 1 year. Get your act together. You have 1 year. I don't know what that means, 1 year. I mean, are they going to remember? Is anybody going to remember in 1 year that he said this amidst a presidential election? I mean, some of his opponents might bring that up. Like, well, what do you mean, Mr. President? It's been 1 year. They set an alarm in their phones. Ask the president the question. Well, it's been 1 year. Are you going to shut down the border now? Because I can guarantee you the drugs are going to continue to pour into this country, whether there's a wall or not. So where's the teeth in this? I'm not sensing any. I'm telling you guys, the president is on thin ice. He's either getting bad advice or his instincts are starting to go the wrong way. Something's amiss here. Even just looking at him today in the news, because he was giving some comments to some reporters today from the cabinet room, and to me, he just looked very tired, which is understandable. Understandable. He's got a lot on his plate. But typically, he looks very energetic, has, good color. Today, he just looked drained. I don't know if anybody else shared that opinion or not, but to me, he just looked not his usual self, which is okay. Everybody does. But I'm just saying, in conjunction with a whole bunch of other things that we've been discussing here, something seems amiss. Taking ownership of this economy, coming out trying to do the two-step. And now the other thing that came out earlier today, Trump tweeted out, again, blaming the Federal Reserve, but saying, despite the fact that the Federal Reserve increased interest rates, the U.S. economy is still looking good. Looking good. Not is good. See, you have to pick up on this stuff. You have to read between the lines. This was the best economic miracle. This is the greatest economy in the world. That was the old saying. This is, not is looking, it is. There's the difference there, a big difference. It's looking good. So what are you saying? You fixing the numbers? You playing those games that we know the government plays? Is this being a setup for something to come? You're already starting to dance to blame the Federal Reserve. What's going on here? Again, something is amiss. Then we have U.S.-China trade talks. Again, I have to talk about this because this is in the news, and it will continue to be in the news. It's a shame what's going on. It's a shame that it's not done yet. But this is where it's at. Now, the other thing that really gets me going with this one, with the U.S.-China trade talks, is the U.S. sets a 2025 target for China to comply with whatever this deal says. 2025. That's 6 years from now. We've been complaining here, anyways, at least I have been, that we've been pulled around here for going on 3 months. More than that. Every day, a little story leaks out. Oh, yeah, everything's going great. Everything's fantastic. Oh, yeah, everything's going great. Everything's fantastic. And then we're going to meet, and then we're not going to meet, and then we're not going to cement anything in. We're not going to have a signing ceremony. We're not going to guarantee anything. It's historic, and the markets rally, and then it comes back, and nothing goes on. Now we're giving China until 2025. Even if the president wins re-election, he will not be president in 2025. Will China comply? Will the next president, whoever that is, and again, it will not be Trump, because we have term limits on the presidency, rightly so. But even if he should win re-election, he won't be there in 2025. So is anybody going to be there to make sure the Chinese are playing ball? We're going to continuously be in this tariff war back and forth for the next 6 years? Is this really what's taking place right now? We're supposed to have the best deal maker ever in the White House, and this is what we get? We're giving them until 2025 to comply with buying more commodities and agricultural products. And who knows what else? Nothing solidified. Nothing solidified. So that's where we stand. Those are the three issues that are facing us today, at least in the news. I really don't even know what else to say. I mean, we've been talking about these stories. I thought they would have come to an end by now. I thought the U.S.-China trade talks would have come to a conclusion. And now we have the president saying earlier today, we'll know over the next 4 weeks if the two countries have a deal. We'll know over the next 4 weeks. 2.5 weeks ago, or last week, it all depends on the source, President Trump and President Xi were supposed to get together to sign a trade deal. Now, the president himself is saying we'll know over the next 4 weeks if the two countries have a deal. Everything is just getting further and further kicked down the road. Further and further and further. They must take us for fools. Something ain't right. Something just stinks to me. It just doesn't smell right. Something's cooking and it ain't good. So we'll see what's coming up. But these trade talks are of big concern because I don't know how much more juice we can squeeze out of this fruit, especially when it comes to the economy and saying that it's the best thing and you try to get a rally in the stock market. Because that's all it's good for at this point. Especially if we go to 2025. I mean, is this something that's just going to be dragged on? Because if this continues like this for another couple of months, I'm going to cease talking about it because it's just going to be a joke. It'll be a waste of your time. It will most definitely be a waste of mine because there's just not going to be anything to report because it's the same stuff. It's the boy who cried wolf. I'm just going to let the wolf eat the little bastard. I mean, enough's enough. I mean, shame on him. You want to talk this stuff up? You better produce. We're not seeing any production. So that's where I'm going to leave it today. I am off tomorrow, but have yourselves a good weekend, and I'll catch you back here on Monday. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Koritis. Godspeed.